Welcome to the Happy Black Woman Podcast, where we're on a mission to empower women to transform their lives through personal development and entrepreneurship. We bring you all the information, inspiration, and motivation you need to create a life of happiness, success, and freedom. Now, please welcome your host, the happy Black woman herself, Rosetta Thurman.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Happy Black Woman Podcast. This is Rosetta. And we are here with Aisha Moore as our guest today on the podcast. And we're going to dive right into our conversation today. Welcome, Aisha.
Thank you, Rosetta. Thanks for having me today on the podcast.
I appreciate you taking the time to be here, Aisha. For those of you who do not know, Aisha is all about self-care, and she's also a part of my inner circle, our Happy Black Woman Mastermind, and that's why she is joining us today, because I wanted to show all of you what it looks like when you turn your passion and your purpose into a business that helps other people. And so Aisha is just another incredible example of that. So I wanted to share with you, everybody why I brought Aisha on, but also wanted her to share with you a little bit about her work. So Aisha, I know I've had a chance to get to know you throughout our programs, but for everyone who doesn't know, tell us about your mission and the work that you do.
All right. Well, my company is called Self-Care by Aisha. And what I essentially do is I help people figure out what's stressing them out. And then we work together to put a plan to do something about that. So essentially, I work with people through coaching, speaking. I do in-person and virtual workshops. And I do that with individuals. But I also go into the organizations and help their members, their volunteers, or their employees work on those same issues. And I really have a soft spot for people who work in nonprofits, because I've worked mostly in nonprofits and government roles, because people like that are generally doing work that is for the greater good. And it's just so important for those types of people to really maintain themselves mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So while what I do is relevant to someone who's in like the Fortune 500 CEO suite, I really feel like, to make a difference in this world, I really want to help those type of people who work in nonprofits or just trying to do something for someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. I would say that nonprofit workers need this information just as much, if not more, than other industries. I also came from the nonprofit sector, and there's such a tendency to overwork ourselves and neglect our self-care because of the importance of the work that's being done. But then we end up almost treating ourselves like we're not important because of everything that has to be done. So it's a huge topic, I know, self-care, but can you speak a little bit to how did you fall into this topic? How did you end up deciding to focus on this for yourself, personally, but then also to go ahead and turn it into a business? What was that motivation or experience for you?
Yeah, so I wasn't really looking to start a business at all. It kind of sort of happened I don't want to say by accident, I say by synchronicity, like everything that's supposed to happen sort of will happen. And essentially, people had started seeing a transformation that I was making. And everyone was asking me, so what are you doing? What are you doing? And so I started telling people, and I would write these long emails to people to explain what I was doing. But that was the transformation they were seeing was sort of about after a 6-month battle with an illness, my doctors really couldn't diagnose right away because it turned out that essentially what was going on with me was that I was in denial about being overwhelmed and exhausted, to the point that I was having serious medical issues. And they would ask me, well, is stress a problem? I'm like, no, I love my job. Because we think of people who are stressed out, like they hate their job, they're not happy, that kind of thing. And for the most part, I really like what I do in terms of the work that I do in public health and healthcare. But that didn't mean that I wasn't overwhelmed and it wasn't an exhausting type of industry. And so there was really no test for that. They were testing me for everything else, spending all my co-pays and all of that stuff, trying to figure it out, having panic attacks, severe nausea. But then one day my primary care provider was like, why don't you see a therapist? And at that point, I was like, I will do anything to feel better because I am not independently wealthy. And at some point, I had to go back to work. We all, we get time off if we're lucky, we have benefits. But I had 4 more weeks or I was going to lose my job. And I was like, okay, everything is on the line here. I need to figure out how I'm going to go back to work. So I started therapy. And through that, I realized that there was a lot of other things I could be doing for myself. And I didn't even really give my therapist a chance to like help me. I just started doing something every single day. So if it took me 2 or 3 hours to get myself right in the morning before I could go to work, that's what I had to do. Because it was just, I knew that I had to take control of the situation. And so then my doctors, both my primary care and then my therapist, saw me getting better in like 3 or 4 months. And they were like, okay, what are you doing? And I started telling them, and they were like, can you share this with every single one of my patients or clients that is going through the same thing that you were going through? Because I've been talking to people for a year or 18 months and they don't get better. And you got better. So that's something you need to share. And so I started blogging because I had been blogging about things for a long time, whether it was dating or natural hair or whatever. I had been blogging. So I knew blogging was a great way to share information with these people. But eventually I ran into a friend and I told him what was going on. He was like, you need to go to happyblackwoman.com. And I'm like, what is that? And so I went there and Rosetta, I just really loved what you were doing. And then he's like, well, Rosetta's coming in town. Let's go to this event. And I'm like, okay, let's go to this event. And I get there and realize that it's an event about starting your business. And I really I was like, okay, whatever. I'm not trying to start a business, but by the end of the night, I really realized that I could take what I was doing and take it further, make it bigger, and really, gain an income and from what I was sharing. It didn't just have to be me sharing as a hobby or me sharing in my spare time. I realized that night that I could turn this into a business, and here I am.
I love your whole story, but I especially love that it was a happy Black man that introduced you to our community.
Yes, yes.
I know that we have them in our tribe, and they send their friends, their sisters, their daughters, and here you are. But one thing that stuck out for me about your story was just about how you went through the process yourself first, and then you started documenting it and sharing with other people, which so many people do not see the value in that. They just say, oh, well, I lost 30 pounds and, it's great. But then all these people start asking them how, and that is the point at which you know that there's something there that could provide value to other people. If people are already asking you, hey, what have you been doing? Like, what's going on? That means that you have something of value. Anytime anybody's asking you advice, not necessarily at work, although at work this can show up as well. But if people are asking you for advice or tips, that is a strong sign that there is something there that you could turn into a business if you wanted to. So I love that it all came from your own experience. And just a follow up, did you notice, because, you had health issues and then you went through this process, did you notice some changes in your health after you went through the self-care process?
Yes, definitely. So I had been diagnosed with generalized anxiety and also with severe acid reflux disease. And, we always say that stressed out person, girl, you need to calm down or you're going to get an ulcer. I was literally on my way to that ulcer. Right. And so through my self-care plan and really taking my self-care seriously and doing it every day, I reversed all of that. I have been on 6 medications. So things for anxiety, needing to sleep, for my stomach and all of that stuff. And so within the first 6 months, I went from 6 medications to 4, and then, 4 to 2 by the end of the year. And within 18 months, I was just down to 1 that was sort of not even related to any of the stress and anxiety stuff. And so I have results, from my doctor showing that this works. And, it's not just the way that I feel. I have measurable results, and that's the part that I really love about it, that it's so measurable. And also, those other things like better relationships with my husband, with my friends at work. It showed up in my review. They talked about how I was much more organized and responsive because I was getting the work done, but probably not in the smoothest, neatest, easiest way. to me, what is so important is that it's not just like theoretical that this happened or just the way I feel, that it was actually noticeable by people at work. It's in my record. It's in my permanent record, that I have
Mm-hmm.
made these transformations. And it's also in my medical record that I've made these transformations. So, and I'm still
Mm-hmm.
married. And so there's just
Yeah.
all this tangible stuff around my process that I know works.
I love it. So many lessons that we can learn from what you're sharing today. But the biggest one, just from your story, is that simply taking care of ourselves better can cause all these ripple effects in other areas of our lives.
Yeah, it's really aligning your mental, spiritual, emotional, physical, financial, one by one, getting them in order, like they say, getting your house in order, just one by one, tackling each one of those areas.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so many questions I want to ask you as a follow-up, but when you talk about self-care, like there's so many ways to approach it. So I just want to get your perspective on it before we move on to some action steps, just so that people can understand, like, what is it? Is it about, because some people they think it's about self-care is about going to get a manicure or pedicure with your girlfriends, and then, everything else in your life stays the same. But, at least I took care of myself today because I got my nails done. So, what is your perspective on self care and what it is and what it looks like?
Yes. So I really had to take some time to make sure, like, whenever I talk to people about this, I'm very clear on what I'm talking about. Because as you just mentioned, the form of self care that people gravitate to is what I call pampering. So those are your manicures, pedicures, massages. And I do all of that stuff. My nails look really nice today. I just got them done. But at the end of the day, it's about making transformations and feeling better, right? So, when I talk about self care, to me, it is a daily practice of things that builds your resilience. So,
Mm.
it's all about staying resilient. It's sort of like the little, I don't know what you call it, like, I guess a wobble weeble doll or something, where like you knock it over and it kind of bounces around, but it never really falls down.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like you think about like the movie The Matrix, right? He kind of like moves around, but he never falls down. And that's what I think self care can do for you. There's not going to
Mm.
be a time when there's no stress in your life, right?
Right.
Even if you have it all together, there's still those things in the world. There's racism, there's sexism, what have you. There's unexpected loss in your life, right? But if you're practicing self care every day, then you can remain resilient because one, you're keeping your stress levels and your really low and you're keeping yourself pretty organized. You're not getting overwhelmed. So when something else comes, it doesn't knock you down. And so that's just what I think is so important about doing it every single day. And then your self care has to match what's going on in your life. So you
Mm.
can go to a blog and it'll be like 10 ways to do this or 10 ways to practice self care, right? But if all of those things are about like physical body and your issues are really with your spiritual health, then it's not matching up. So you have to make sure your self care matches. So you have to do an inventory. You have to inventory like what's going on in my life, what do I want to improve, and then match self care to the places that you need to make improvements in order to feel better on a daily basis.
Mm. Oh, that's so great to think about where you are and match your self care to that, because I don't think a lot of people think of it that way. It can be almost random just because when we get a feeling that something's not right, it sort of gravitate to whatever is the first thing that comes up as a resource or as an option. And having that thought beforehand could make this whole process so much more effective. Awesome. Well, I want to know for the ladies that are listening and taking notes, they're like, okay, I get it. Maybe they are where you were or someplace similar in their life, in their job, in their career, in their business. And they want to know, like, what are some specific action steps they can take to take care of themselves better? What can you offer us that we can implement starting today?
So overall, I would say, even if you're not at that point where you're feeling burned out, just start now because it's so much easier to do this if you're not starting from like the bottom, if you're not starting from nothing. So everyone should start doing something every day. So find something to do every day. And the way that you can do that is that you need to put you on your calendar. You need to make yourself a priority. That is the first thing you should do. So if you have your planner, take it out right now. If you don't have a planner, go somewhere and get one. You can get them for $1 at a dollar store. Just get a planner, use your Google Calendar, and mark off some time for yourself every day. And then once a week, what you want to do is do what's called an artist date. And it comes from the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And so you want to spend 1 to 2 hours a week doing something just for you. You want to take yourself out on that date. So whether you go have a glass of wine by yourself, if you go read a book, you might go get that manicure, pedicure, but that's something you should do for yourself every week. And if someone asks you, oh, can you help me out with this? Or can you go shopping with me? I don't know what it is. I'm just making stuff up. You look at your calendar, you're like, nope, can't do that. That's my artist date. Or nope, can't do that. That's my self-care time. And take it as seriously as you would any other type of appointment that you have. It's not something that's just nice to have or it's tentative, it's a placeholder. It needs to be real. You need to really protect that time and set boundaries around that time.
I have heard of the artist date. I have the book, The Artist's Way, which is a beautiful book. And I know that part, the setting time in the calendar and just being by yourself is so hard for people. I will say so hard for people because I'm an introvert. I love being by myself. I have to do a people date because I love being by myself. But I know, most people are extroverts. It's hard to set that time as well for a lot of women in our tribe because they have not just themselves to think about. They have their family, their kids, friends are asking them to do things. Their church is, asking them, they have volunteer things that they're doing there. So many things are competing almost for our time. What do you say to the woman that's like, that sounds great, but have you seen my calendar? Have you seen my to-do list? How can I do that? How do you advise your clients to get through that block of actually setting aside this time that's just for them?
Yeah, that is sort of one of the objections that I do hear from some of my clients. And what I say to that is that, what does the other side look like? So if you've come to me as a client and you're all stressed out, if you don't want to be stressed anymore, then this is what you need to do, right? And so I like to focus on the feeling that I'm going to have if I do this, right? If I do this stuff, so right now I'm in the moment, I may be sick, I may be sweating, I may be resentful of this person because of all of the stress. And is 1 hour a week plus, let's say 30 minutes a day. So whatever that is, 2.5 hours a week. And there's pretty much 84 waking hours in the day, in a week. So if you are awake 12 hours a day times 7 days a week, that's 84 hours. So you can't take 2.5 hours, 3 hours to help yourself feel better, then to me, again, it's that you are not serious about making yourself a priority. And therefore, you're going to keep suffering with what you're going through. And to me, it's not worth the suffering. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I try to get my clients to think about. And then at the end of the day, it's about the vision that you have for your life. And I don't want people to dream about a future life when things are not stressful, or when I retire, or when the kids get older, I'll do these things, right? You can have it now. Everybody can have it now. That's what I really believe.
Mm-hmm. That's another thing that I know people say a lot is, well, I'll take care of myself when I have time, or I'll do this and that when I have time at some future date. And we're always pushing it off, pushing ourselves off. And it's at some point, that future time might not be available to us, and it might not be as enjoyable. If you're sick 10 years from now, you can't really take advantage of all the things you wanted to do as much as you can now. So I love that you talk about what's that future state and what's the feeling that you want to have versus the feeling that you have now. There's a gap and you have to make some changes in order to get to what you really want. So that sounds like the point at which your clients have to make a decision. Either they're going to make a change or they're going to stay where they are.
And, we sometimes wait for that time, and it might it may never come. I think one of the parts of my story is that I was looking forward to this 2-week break that I was supposed to have at work. And I was like, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. The White House called. I'm not saying no to Obama. They called and asked something that had to be done in that 2-week period, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had been planning for that period and got taken away from me. Mm-hmm. And so I really believe now, like, you don't know if that time that you're looking forward to is really going to come to fruition. So do something now. So don't wait for these long periods of time to then take care of yourself, because you're letting that stress build up and you're holding on to it, and that's affecting your body. So let's not hold on to it. Let's let it go every day.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great. What other steps can we take to take better care of ourselves?
So some of the other things that I do in terms of the steps, it's really my morning routine. That is where I got started with this whole thing, because remember, I needed to go back to work. So I had to figure out how I was going to get myself out of bed. And that, to me, is the core thing that I think everyone should really focus on, is that how you start your day. So from my philosophy is that you give to yourself first, and then everyone gets what's left. Or you could say it another way, you give to yourself first so you can give more effectively to others, right? And so I used to be one of those people who like timed everything down to the moment. So if the metro was coming at 7:04, then I left my house at 6:58. And then it took me 7 minutes to shower, 3 minutes to brush my teeth. And I tried to time everything down to the minute, because it didn't make sense to me for some reason to leave the house any earlier or do anything before work. And now everything is completely flipped, because by the time I got home, I was too tired to do anything for myself, or I would talk myself out of going to the gym or what have you. And so now it's completely flipped, that I wake up between like 5 and 5:30. And the first thing I do is I listen to or read the daily word. So it's sort of like a short spiritual affirmation for the day. And then after that, I will sort of choose a mindfulness activity. So I might do yoga, I might meditate, I might journal. It just depends on how I'm feeling. So if my back feels tight, then I'll go for the yoga. If my mind's really cluttered, I might go for the meditation. If I'm really thinking about like how I want to manifest my day, then I'll go for the journaling. But I'll spend like at least 30 minutes doing one of those three things. And then, as all of our doctors say, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And so I make sure I always eat breakfast, and my trainer has said it needs to have 30 grams of protein. So I'll do a green smoothie, or I'll have some oatmeal, or I'll have like some eggs or something like that. And then I'll get in the shower, get dressed while I sing at the top of my lungs to my Instagram playlist. Anyone that knows me knows how much I love music. And I have this playlist that it's up to like 50 some odd songs. Every time I hear like any kind of inspirational song, I add it. And it doesn't have to be like gospel or something like that. It could be rock, it could be reggae. Like if it just has any type of positive lyrics about love or anything like that, I'll add it. And then I spend an hour working on my business. So, because again, if I don't do it in the morning, then it really doesn't happen later in the day. So I just spend a quick hour in the morning working on my business. And then, and after that, then I get on with the rest of my day. I start working, whether I'm working from home or I have to leave the house to do work. I do all those things before I get to work, because otherwise I get distracted. Other things come up, and the things that I think are a priority, I want to do first before I do what other people consider a priority for me.
Awesome way to outline your morning routine. Now, do you wake up at the same time every day as well?
I do. No, even on the weekends, my body will not let me sleep. I have to fight it. I'm like, go to sleep on Saturday. So yeah, I wake up at the same time every day. So part of that is making sure that I go to bed on time as well.
So what's your normal wake up time, go to bed time?
I usually I'm in the bed by 10:30. Like that's the latest I can do, unless there's like some extenuating circumstance. I'm in the bed by 10:30, and I tend to wake up. The alarm goes off at like 5, but I'll crawl out of bed somewhere between 5 and 5:30.
Yeah, that's a big piece of this process, because a lot of people, just to make time for self-care, a lot of people have to rearrange their schedule, starting with what time they wake up, what time they go to sleep. And so what that requires is sometimes so many things that can get you caught up to where you're staying up all night. And what I've heard from people so many times is that their stuff gets pushed to late at night. So that's the only time that they feel that they can work on their business or do stuff for themselves. And so they're up till midnight, 2 in the morning, but they still have to be at work at a certain time. So what are some of the decisions that you feel people might have to make as they are incorporating self care into their life to be able to free up this time for themselves?
So we have to think about the things that we were taught and the things that we sort of caught along the way about what success looks like. And so a lot of times we don't have time for self care because we have packed our days with all these things that we were told that we have to do or that we should do. So there's some things at home we learn from our parents, from our family, whether they told us or not, or we just saw it. We felt like we had to do all of those things, right? And so if you're one of those people who has decided that they want to, you have a full-time job, you may be on some volunteer boards, and you're trying to start a business, something has to give. And sometimes we don't give them up because Big Mama's like, your house has to be clean like this, or you have to clean your own house. And we feel guilty about asking for help for a lot of things. So that is, I think, one of the last things in my self-care process that I work with people on. I help you make a plan, but your plan doesn't matter if you haven't set some boundaries. So you need to set some boundaries. So you have to give up some things. So I realized that I needed to invest. Like I had this goal where I wanted to have this super clean house, but if I'm at a board meeting at night and I'm, waking up at 5 a.m. to do my self-care and work on my business, who has time to clean the house, right? So I hired someone to come and help me clean my house. And some people might think that's crazy because it's just me, my husband, and my dog, but we're both entrepreneurs. And so that was something that we had to do, was like give that up. We had to have someone help us in that area. And then the other thing that I've done in terms of asking for help, I just had to hire coaches to help me with things, because otherwise I'm like reading books and reading blogs, trying to figure things out. And that takes away time. And I'm like, okay, expert on nutrition, let me join your program so you can just tell me what to do. You can give me the blueprint. It saves me so much time. Expert on starting passion-based business, Rosetta, give me the blueprint so that I don't have to spend so much time on that. So I think sometimes we think that effort is what's important, to show people how much effort. And I've just got out of that mindset, and I just decided to just ask for help and not be ashamed of not knowing something. I don't have to figure it out all for myself. And so whether it's asking a friend to help me do something or it's hiring an expert, that's just the last 2 years, it's all been for me about asking for help. And then number 2, learning when to say when. You don't have to do everything. It's not about telling people your resume with all the things you have to do, because you're probably not doing any of them well. So an example from my life is I was on 3 nonprofit boards, right? Because there's so much to do in this world. Yeah. And so you join one, then when someone's like, oh, Target, you join another, you join another, you join another. And I wasn't serving any of them well. So I got off of 2 of them. I'm only on one. And I spelled out for them exactly what it is I could contribute. Yeah. And now they, again, talk tangible results. They're able to say to me, like, you're contributing so much more now that you're solely focused on our organization and it's clear what you're contributing. As before, it just felt really nice to be asked. And I was in, like, I really love being asked to do things and saying yes to them. And I had to let go of that way of defining success for myself. I'm really more interested in being effective.
Yeah. Yeah, so many great nuggets in what you've shared that I'm just going to let you guys rewind it if you need to and listen back to it, because there's so much value in defining success and happiness for yourself instead of kind of going on autopilot and assuming that this is success. I have all these things to do. I'm so busy. I'm so tired. That must mean that I'm successful, when really what we're saying is maybe that's actually failure. Maybe that's actually not the way to go, but you have to reflect and be honest with yourself and determine that, and then your life can really transform. So I know that you have come across a lot of different resources as you have gone on this journey of self-care for yourself and also supporting other people in their self-care journey. So could you identify one book, like one of your top books that have inspired you along the way?
Yeah. So we were just talking about like this mindset of busyness and, the glorification of busyness and doing too much. And 15 years ago, my best friend's sister came up to me with a binder with a photocopy of this book called The Tao of Pooh. So Tao and then Pooh, like Winnie the Pooh. And this story of it's sort of like an introduction to the religion or philosophy Taoism, but he tells it through the story of Winnie the Pooh and all the characters in the book, The House at Pooh Corner. And essentially, he kind of breaks down each personality and to explain the personalities in the world. And so Pooh is very, very simplistic, likes to absorb lots of things and doesn't come with any preconceived notions. And then you have like Eeyore, who is always kind of like a little bit snarky and really skeptical of things. And then you have Owl, who's a know-it-all, and the rabbit, who's really cunning. And it kind of helped me see that we all have a little bit of those people or those personalities in each one of us. But it helped me to see like the pros and cons of each of those personality types. So I was one of those people who really, really, valued all the knowledge and that I had. But what's the point of filling my head with knowledge if it's not that useful on an everyday basis? So it really helped me think about who I was and what was important to me. And now looking back 15 years later, I realized that my best friend's sister gave that book to me right after she had gone through a transformation. So even then she could see that I needed a transformation, but she didn't tell me why she gave me the book. But, like they say, when I needed the book, it was there for me. And so it's a book that it's not one of the books that I always hear people mention when they talk about personal development, but it was one of the first things that I read. And I was so happy that, she gave me that binder 15 years ago. And for whatever reason, I took it across 4 states and 6 or 7 apartments. I don't know why I couldn't let it go, but I guess, I've thrown away lots of things, but I just would not let that binder go. And I'm so glad that I kept it.
The Tao of Pooh. I love it. That has never been recommended on this show. So thank you for the book recommendation. I will be adding that to our show notes here. And before we let you go, Aisha, I want to make sure that everybody who's listening that wants to know more about how they can incorporate self-care into their life can keep in touch with you and take advantage of all your resources. So what's the best way for us to follow you online?
Yes. So the best way to follow me online is to visit my website, and it's selfcarebyAisha.com, and Aisha is spelled Aisha. And I have a free gift for all of you. I have a basic 10-step self-care plan there that anybody can use to get started. So if you go to selfcarebyAisha.com/free gift, you can download it, and then you can also stay in touch with me through my email newsletter that way. And I also post a lot on Facebook. So if you go to Self-Care by Aisha on Facebook, you can get lots of tips and tricks and tools. I'm always sharing articles and things that I read there and different quotes and things. So those are the best places to reach me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, Aisha. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosetta.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, ladies. Aisha is just one of the amazing entrepreneurs that I featured on the show. So if you have not listened to our previous episodes, you are missing out. If you want more of the Happy Black Woman podcast, go to our website, happyblackwoman.com, and click on podcast, and you will be able to listen to all of our previous episodes. And if you're on iTunes, you can subscribe to the podcast and make sure that you do not miss any of our future episodes as well. So for those of you that also want an in-person experience with our Happy Black Woman tribe, I invite you to join us at our upcoming event in January 13th through the 15th in Tampa, Florida. It's called Manifest Your Vision 3-Day Mindset Retreat. So if you want to get a taste of our Happy Black Woman experience in person, you want to go from podcast to in person, go to happyblackwomanretreat.com. Until next time, ladies, have a beautiful day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Happy Black Woman podcast. If you want all the show's notes from today's episode, go to happyblackwomanpodcast.com. Plus, we'll send you a copy of Rosetta's free life mapping workbook. We look forward to empowering you next time. And until then, do something this week that makes you happy.